Hi, this is Kelly with the Two Broads Talking Politics podcast, part of the Demcast Podcast Network. This episode is part of our book club series, where we read and review the books by the Democratic presidential candidates. Enjoy! Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and we have another book club episode for you. This is our Democratic presidential candidates book club, and I believe the final episode of said book club. Stay tuned for the end when we talk about how we're going to morph this. So joining me as always is my co-host Sophy. Hey Sophy.
Hey Kelly.
And we have freelance writer Kaz Weida. Hi Kaz.
Hi Kelly. Hello.
And joining us again is actress and writer Elizabeth Thorp. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, ladies.
All right. So for today, we have read, or some of us have sped read, Andrew Yang, The War on Normal People, The Truth About America's Disappearing Jobs and Why Universal Basic Income is Our Future. From the wordiness of his title, you may sense that he is not the best writer ever. So let's jump into it. Did you like the book?
Let's all say our answer on the count of three at the same time and see what happens.
All right. One,
it's
two.
like a rock, paper, scissors.
All right. 1, 2, 3. No. Ooh, there's a yes. All right.
No, I didn't say yes. I said meh.
All right. So, Sophie, that was the most
very important
enthusiastic answer. So go for it. Tell us what you thought.
I was kind of torn because he is not a very good writer, and as a person who is an actual professional writer, supports herself and her family with writing, it was pretty painful to read. I also didn't like, and this is a problem that I always have with Yang, is the sort of schmaltzy terms he gives for things. He calls his UBI the freedom dividend and freedom dollars, and the title itself is kind of cutesy about normal people being different than people who are good with tech, and I just don't really like the way he phrases things. I think it's kind of pandering almost. It's kind of cheesy, and it just turns me off. On the other hand, I did like that it was a book that was very heavy on information and theory, and not as heavy. At least I didn't read it all the way through. I sped read it, but it didn't seem as heavy on the inspiring personal story, which is always what kind of annoys me about these types of books. So that's why I would give it a 4 or a 5. On my scale from 1 to 10.
Okay, out of 10, not out of 5.
No. And I would say it was my least favorite book of the books we have read so far. But I did think I did actually like one thing about it, which is that it was very focused on policy and not so much on Yang.
All right, fair. Kaz, what did you think?
Andrew Yang isn't wrong. I think that's the best thing I can say about this book. He's not wrong. And as a journalist who has actually written about UBI and studied it myself, I agree with him about the necessity for universal basic income. But I think I also come from the same space as the rest of you, which is, gosh, does he have to phrase things the way that he phrases them?
Right.
And words matter, right? And a lot of this language is kind of, there are a few passages. I'm not just referring to sort of the overtones of ableism that you get in some of this. Mm-hmm. There was one section that just blew me out of the water where in one sentence, he equates the party atmosphere and the loose morals going on in college campuses with rape. And I was like, whoa, wait, those two things don't belong in the same sentence. We need to back up.
Mm-hmm. Right.
there are quite a few points in this book where I was like, really? Like, I guess he gets points for at least understanding the issue, but he is by no means the first person to come forward these sorts of policies and these sorts of concepts. And I really don't like the way that he did it and the way that he phrases things in this book in quite a few places.
I really like that you pointed out that sort of like way in which he'll be sort of talking about something that makes a lot of sense, and then suddenly he'll try to connect to something that seems like sort of unrelated or not equivalent, and you'll just be like, weird. So he does that with marriage and the family. He'll be like, oh yeah, UBI is important because, you know, we're going to lose all these jobs and the meaning of work is going to change. And then also this is why marriages have been failing. And I was like, wait, what? Like, there's no connection there. But he keeps doing those sort of like logical jumps where you'll be with him and you'll be agreeing with him, and then all of a sudden he'll be like, and this is why this other thing happens. And you'll be like, what? Show your work.
Right. Yeah.
So Elizabeth, I know you didn't like it.
Yeah, I did. I didn't like it so much that I didn't finish it. He's a horrible writer, and I get that, but like that's what professional editors are for too. So I kind of am like, what publishing house thought that was a good product? But I also think he's super hokey, and honestly, if I didn't know who he was and I read that, I would think that that person was 95 years old because he's just talks like that, and his delivery is so uncomfortable. But I mean, I'm interested in learning more about the automation and the job displacement, but at the same time, I was falling asleep. Like, it was so boring. Other books that we've read have at least been intriguing or interesting, or, you know, felt like I should, you know, continue reading. Really felt was cringeworthy was, you know, his stereotypical bullying story about being Asian and how kids were teasing him about having a small penis.
I know. I could not believe I was listening to a presidential candidate talk about his penis.
You know, and he was, stop. Please stop. So, like, it was a weird. So obviously the penis part, like, was censored by somebody.
It was a wild. I mean, it was a really bad book. You guys know I usually listen to these as audiobooks, and so this one I listened to, and I kept trying to bump it up to triple speed because I wanted to get through it quicker, but he talks too fast for that. So I could get to like 2.5 speed and still understand him. And then sometimes I'd be like, no, just triple speed the next part. I don't want to listen to all of this. I mean, I will say my least favorite part of Yang's style is that when he decides to list things, he can't list just like 3 examples of something. He has to list 20 examples of whatever it is he's talking about. And so he'll be like, you know, the cities of, and then he rattles off 20 cities. It's like, we didn't need all of that. We could have gotten the point with 2 or 3. And I just like, it just is so many words, so many unnecessary words. And this is also the first and only time I have done an audiobook where they kept referring to a PDF that you had to look at because there were too many things that like didn't work as audio, I guess, too many charts that I never bothered to go look at. But that was a unique experience.
Yeah, no doubt he's super smart and has things to contribute and some creative ideas. But he's just, he lacks any charisma, in my opinion, to be like a public official.
Yeah, so I guess that is the real question I have coming out of this is why he thought that running for president was the best next step. Like there's no explanation in this book. Even if it had been better written, there's no explanation for why you take these ideas and then run for president. Like, I feel like there's a lot of good things you could do. There's a lot of ways you could talk about UBI, get more people thinking about it than running for president. I don't know. Did I miss something in the book? Do we feel like he has any sort of sense of, like, how to run a country?
Yeah, I missed the same part. So I'd like to be enlightened.
I mean, I didn't think there was anything in the book that indicated what connection this would have to his actual campaign for president. Outside of the book, I assume he's like a Ralph Nader type who is running in order to like get visibility for his issue, which is fine. But
it would be cheaper for him just to donate to his candidate of choice and campaign for them and be a surrogate at a very top level, and then go in to be like, you know, the labor secretary or something. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I mean, I'm supposing if he doesn't actually want to be in government, which I suspect he doesn't, since he has never actually been in government before, and he is not, you know, he hasn't run for anything before, and he doesn't seem to have any interest in any other government positions. I'm assuming it's just solely to get exposure, which also I think explains his previous debate performance as well. I think a lot of it is to like get attention for UBI as an idea and inject it into sort of the public consciousness, kind of in the way I think that Bernie Sanders, although I think Bernie Sanders actually wanted to be president, the way that Bernie Sanders kind of injected the idea of Medicare for all into the 2016 election.
Well, and Yang has this whole attitude in the book about I'm sort of the ambassador from Silicon Valley coming down to talk to all you normal folks, and all my tech bro friends don't get it, or too snobby to understand, or too self-involved, or too whatever. And so in that way, although he doesn't directly say it, it's kind of like he's playing entrepreneur hero. I'm going to come save you guys from this catastrophic thing that's about to happen to our economy that you have no idea about. And for me, I was like, yeah, we've been ringing this bell. Everyone has been ringing this bell for 10 years. We have an idea. It's just we don't have anybody in place in government to do something about it. And I'm not sure you're the guy I want in that position.
Right.
I'm not sure you're the best equipped guy to put a plan in place. His understanding of UBI and how it would work, and then how it would work specifically if the government were to implement it, had some pretty significant holes in it that I wasn't 100% on board with.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like that's always what comes up with Yang for me, is that like I'm a huge supporter of UBI. I just don't actually want Yang to be the person who implements it. Like I think UBI is both a good idea and also kind of inevitable, but I would rather somebody who has sort of a firmer grasp of quote unquote normal people and the realities that they face in America today to be implementing it. Because a little bit of, when he starts to talk about the specifics of it, of what he plans to do, it always sort of goes off the rails. And I would really rather a more focused, serious candidate talked about it and explained how they were going to do it.
There was a part where he is like talking about his colleagues at Venture for America and how they had this working theory that smart people in the U.S., you know, do one of like 6 things in 6 cities, you know, academia, consulting, finance, law, medicine. And it's only in New York, San Francisco, Boston, LA, DC. And I thought that was incredibly lame. I mean, like there are no smart people in Peoria, Illinois. It's just and condescending. And so like he's a part of that tech bro culture. So, you know, when he criticizes it and then says something like that, it's just tough to swallow, I guess.
You know, Kaz, when you were talking about he's trying to play the hero, like he has this whole section toward the end of the book where he's talking about video games and on and on and on about video games. And like, I wonder if he sort of...
I didn't get that far.
be glad.
Okay.
I mean, he's making what could be an interesting and nuanced argument. It's not by him, but an argument about how video games are sort of immediately rewarding. And, you know, of course, it's more fun to play video games than, you know, go to work. But going to work is what pays the bills, etc. I mean, I'm not sure exactly where he was going with it, but I imagine there could be interesting places you could go with that. But I think that he is part of video game culture. I mean, I don't know enough about video game culture to sort of connect all those dots, but I feel like it's very clear that video games are very important to him, and that kind of mindset makes a lot of sense to him. And so maybe he does sort of unwittingly see himself as a hero of some sort, or wants to be that kind of hero.
Okay.
Given a little more time, I could flesh that out, but I'm gonna just write on the level that he writes for now.
All right.
So, I don't know. The usual question I ask is, what kind of president would this person be based on this book? So, I think I know the answers, but I suppose my answer would just be kind of clueless.
Yeah, totally out of touch and not qualified.
I think what alarms me about Yang is the number of people I've seen who are like super anti-Trump, who are like, oh, but Yang seems like a good alternative. And I'm like, well, if your problem was that the commander-in-chief is like a person who is completely unpredictable and has no idea what he's doing in office because he didn't do any sort of preparation in his lifetime for it, this is not the person you want to replace him with.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that there are some things, too, that alarmed me in the book that if I didn't know this is Andrew Yang and was reading it, I might assume they were GOP talking points. Things about how people routinely abuse disability and the system is totally rigged. And how, when he's talking about video games and how they lead to disenfranchisement and all, that they're not positive or that they can't be positive ways for people to invest in building community. And I was like, really? I don't think video games are the problem. I think maybe they're a symptom in some cases, but he seemed to be sort of threading these lines that kind of skirted awfully close to some things that I've heard from GOP candidates that left me wondering, like, what side is Yang on? Like, what are his actual ideals? I'm not sure that I know.
Yeah, and I have noticed, this is Elizabeth, I've noticed on Twitter that a lot of kind of former Trump supporters who aren't jazzed about what's happening now, like, shocker, kids in cages, all sorts of horrible, things going on, are now Yang supporters. I mean, on the, during the debates when I was asking a very real question, why is he even on the stage? A lot of these folks, and they're aggressive, kind of came at me. And a good amount said they used to support Trump. So I just find that interesting. It's like exactly what Kaz referenced. There's some kind of Republican undercurrent there.
So we might be remiss if we didn't mention, since we're talking right after the debate, that Yang wants to give away $1,000 a month to 10 families, I think, for a year. When I heard that, it was like, okay, it seems a little hokey, whatever. I understand what you're doing. But then I learned that he's going to do this with campaign funds, which seems, I don't know, not legal to me.
I kind of don't understand how that's not bribery.
Right.
I know the FEC is like kind of not working right now, but I don't understand how that in and of itself is not bribery. I was very confused by it. And honestly, as a person who used to like Yang a lot more than I do now, I was really turned off by it. But in the debates, like it really turned me against him. It made me really angry that he kind of like did this cheap game show kind of thing, where he's going to get everybody to look at his website by bribing them with a prize. That really grossed me out.
Right. And his press secretary said this candidate will make an epic announcement of, massive proportions that no other candidate has ever done. And I'm like, that's it? Really? It is $1,000 a month? I mean, this guy has a net worth of $3 million. Like, what? That's not. It was again cringy, for lack of a better word.
All right. Is there anything else we need to say about this book?
don't buy it.
Are you more or less likely to vote for him now that you have read his book?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's probably equal, right?
One,
Like
2, 3, and say the answer more or less on the count of 3.
I mean, isn't the answer probably just like equally because none of us were going to vote for him in the first place?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, but like even more so. I have a strong, yeah.
Yes. All right, so let's talk about something happier. We are going to change this book club because we are now out of presidential candidates whose books we want to read. In fact, we're clearly one past where we should have stopped this. And we are going to switch the book club up a little bit. We're going to keep reading. It's been fun reading and talking to you ladies, so I'm excited to keep going, but with books that we're far more interested in reading. So everybody should sort of stay tuned for that. We haven't quite figured out what the next book is, but I think we're going to go to every 4 weeks instead of every 3 weeks. Most of the other books we'd be interested in are a little bit longer and denser, and we actually care about reading them. So we will we'll get back to everyone on what those books might look like. If you have recommendations for us, we're obviously interested in intersectional feminism and environmentalism and all sorts of civil rights and all sorts of interesting topics. So if you have suggestions for books, let us know. We're on Twitter at Two Broads Talk. We're on Facebook at Two Broads Talking Politics, and, everywhere. You can find us everywhere. All right. Is there anything else that anyone would like to say before we wrap up? Yes, no, maybe. All right. So thank you again to Sophy, Kaz, and Elizabeth for joining me today to talk about a book that none of us liked very much.
I want my 3 hours of my life back that I spent skimming that. But
hey, at least
I'll
now
for $1,000 a month.
At least now when the Yang Gang comes at you, you can be like, "Look, I've read his book. I still don't like him."
Yeah, I'm positively positive that this isn't going to work for me.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And we'll see you all back here in 4 weeks to talk about a TBA book that we hope will be much, much better than Andrew Yang, The War on Normal People.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast.